Conservation of matter says that atoms cannot be created or destroyed during a chemical reaction, which means that the atoms just rearrange. The atoms of one compound separate, break apart, and then rearrange into another compound. And scientists use chemical equations to represent these chemical reactions and to represent the conservation of matter. So in this one, we're going to use sodium and chlorine, and we're going to create sodium chloride. Now, let's go ahead and look at this. We start with our reactants. Reactants is what we're starting with. So we're starting with sodium and we're starting with chlorine. And then this arrow shows us what we're producing. Our producers are sodium chloride. So to help us out, let's go ahead and write down how many sodiums we have. Now, this 2 right here is called a subscript. And a subscript tells us how many atoms of the element is in that molecule or that compound. So we notice we have a 2 here, so there are 2 sodiums. There's also a 2 subscript next to the chlorine. So we have 2 chlorines. And we're going to represent the sodiums with these blue squares and these chlorines with these green squares. Now, let's look on the other side. There's no subscript number after the sodium or after the chlorine, which means that there is a 1. So sodium on this side, we have 1, and chlorine on this side, we have 1. Now, again, conservation of matter says that the atoms are not created or destroyed, they just rearrange. So let's go ahead and let's create this. We have 2 sodiums here, 2 chlorines here, and they're going to rearrange to make a sodium chloride where they're together. Now here's the problem. Look, we have these 2 left over, but conservation of matter says you can't have 2 left over. They can't be created or destroyed, which means we're going to have to bring in what's called a coefficient. Now, a coefficient is a number that's placed in front of a compound or a molecule to tell us how many compounds or molecules we need. So if we look at this, we still have these 2 left over on the side here, which means that we're going to need to put a 2 in front of this. If we put a 2 in front of this, that's the coefficient. So 2 times the 1, since there's no number again after the sodium, 2 times that 1 would give us instead 2 sodiums. 2 times that 1 of chlorine would give us instead 2 chlorines. And now these can rearrange to come over on this side. So again, let's see what happened. We started with a molecule that had 2 sodium atoms and a molecule that had 2 chlorine atoms. And those atoms rearranged to make 2 sodium chloride atoms. So let's go ahead and take a recap. Conservation of matter says that atoms cannot be created or destroyed, and we use chemical equations to demonstrate that. In a chemical equation, we talk about what we start with, which are called reactants, and what we end with, which is called products. Subscripts tell us how many atoms of an element are in a compound or molecule, and coefficients tell us how many of those molecules or compounds we have.